Mechanimus Studios. They're going to be speaking about Century's Edge, their latest role-playing game, telling us a bit about everything, I guess. I don't know what they have planned, so I'll leave it to them. Where's yours? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, as a very quick introduction, my name is William, this is Yannick, and that is Nestor. We are Mechanimus Studios, and we're going to talk to you about our game. We're going to make this presentation into 3 parts. Pretty much, first part, Nestor is going to talk about all writing a narrative for a game and why it is important, why your game needs a story or needs to have some sort of world within where the game is happening. Then I'm going to explain a little bit about our design process. Now, just so you know, first things first, our game is a role-playing game, so we are going to talk about how to design a role-playing game. However, the design process is very, very similar to any kind of other game design. I think we could get started? Okay. Very well. So, Nestor, take it away.
To start off on a general point, how many of you are gamers? Not much, pretty much everyone. Okay. Also, I'm a gamer. I've been a gamer for too long, actually. I mean, I started actually playing games on my Amiga 500 way back when, and I remember happy summers when I was 2-player in Castle Wolfenstein with a friend of mine. My friend would be on the keyboard, I would be on the mouse. Huge fun, especially when you don't get cornered. Anyway, games evolved in an interesting way. I'm starting on this general point because I want to link up what we're doing with what probably is what most of you are doing, which is more software-based game development. A bit more information about our game. Our game per se is what's known as a tabletop pen and paper role-playing game. If the majority of you are gamers, I'm sure you've heard of digital role-playing games, Mass Effect, Dragon Age. Going back a bit more, Baldur's Gate, Planescape Torment, those are some of the older role-playing games. Basically, its very essence, a role-playing game is when you role-play a character. You assume a persona, a different character, different personality, a different background, and you play the game as if you were playing that particular character. Pen and paper tabletop role-playing games are exactly no different than that. You have a character, you play that character. The medium is a bit different. The medium, instead of interacting with a digital program, a construct that is on your PC or on your console, you're interacting with a games master. The parameters are the same, but the limitations do not exist. Where a PC game is limited to its programming, to its scripting, to the scenario envisaged by the game designer, the games master has no such limitations. He can create an adventure, he can create a context, and modify it as he goes along with no limitations or restrictions. So in a way, it's based more on interactive storytelling and imagination rather than any kind of predetermined narrative progression. Okay, so what we're doing is just that. We have basically created a role-playing world, a context, a setting, and we've also created the rules where that setting plays out. William will be talking a bit more about these rules themselves. I'm here to talk about why we felt that narrative is so important in the game design process. Okay, let me backtrack on a different point slightly. One of our first guiding principles when we were coming up with our game, Sanctuary's Edge, was coming up with an identity. What makes the world, what makes our story, what makes our product unique. So we sat down originally and we decided that we needed to be identifiable yet unique in our own way. What does that mean? That means that for players, for our audience, for the public to identify with what we're trying to say, with what we're trying to create, we decided there was required for a certain amount of familiarity. Basically, that people can identify with what they see. But in a way, as not to make it too similar to something else, we originally, when we sat down to start creating the story and the game and the product itself, we wanted to go for a bit of a futuristic Western feel to the game. We knew there was scope within the gaming I won't say market within the gaming world, because similar worlds, similar products were moving along well, and in fact our inspirations, I'll tell you about them in a while. And we decided that we wanted to go for that. We wanted to go for something with that particular feel to it. In fact, I think our cover conveys that pretty well, I believe. And to achieve that, however, was a bit trickier, because there were instances where we were slipping into other genres, and other more prominent genres. For example, at some points when we were coming up with art, or even when we were writing our story, we were either slipping into sci-fi or slipping into a bit of a steampunk western feel. So that was a bit difficult for us. We had to sometimes review what we were doing, take a step back and reevaluate, possibly accentuating other elements instead of others, so that we would create the balance we wanted. Because one thing we did not want for people to look at what we were creating and think, oh, okay, cowboys in space. Because we were going for something a bit more deeper than that. It's a bit more nuanced. Calling it cowboys in space is not doing, is a bit of a superficial take on what we're trying to achieve. And so we created a number of what we called design guiding principles, which were principles to keep in mind, not only when creating artwork, but even when creating the story, when writing content, when writing text, when designing the rules, when designing pretty much every aspect of the game. A couple of these concepts, just to give you an idea, is, for example, we gave them names, so they would be immediately recognizable. We call them, for example, the setting is made to last. What does that mean? It means that in our world, everything, be it technology, be it a vehicle, be it a weapon, be it clothing, everything is made to last because of the conditions within the setting we've created. I'll tell you a bit more about that in a while. We created another design principle called Science of Tomorrow, because everything we wanted to create in our world should convey the idea of sci-fi, should be futuristic, should not be, for example, post-apocalyptic. For those of you who've played Fallout 3, that has a certain post-apocalyptic feel to it, which is basically, it looks like it is futuristic technology, but still looks old and outdated. We did not want to take that approach. We wanted our setting to convey a futuristic feel. Okay, to discuss some of our inspirations, as you've probably maybe realized from the artwork, some of our inspirations included, for example, Serenity, if you've watched it, the anime called Trigun, Cowboy Bebop, PC games like Mass Effect, StarCraft 2, and even Deus Ex, and from a literary perspective, Dune was one of our guiding principles as well. Okay, to discuss a bit more about the importance of story and narrative to the gaming experience. As a starting point, the game itself and the story itself are in a way two separate constructs. One, the game itself is a purely mechanical construct. It is a set of rules within which the player interacts and tries to overcome the challenges of the game. This is purely mechanical. The story is the context in which that challenge takes place. In the beginning, games like Pac-Man did not require any kind of story. Their challenge was a purely physical one, either ability in terms of reflexes or agility, or maybe puzzle games. They were intellectual in scope, but they did not require a story because the game was the challenge itself. But as games developed, even early on in games, in fact, you'd find traces of stories here and there. For example, Super Mario, as essential and as rudimentary as a game, it still had a story. Super Mario was still trying to rescue Princess Peach. That was the motivation for playing the game. It was a physical challenge. You were bouncing from block to block. But the premise of why Super Mario was risking his life is that he's doing it for the premise of love, so to speak. So the story was still present. Other games, nevertheless, had these elements there. And from there on, obviously, as games became more sophisticated, stories developed more. The motivation became more nuanced. You'd have, for example, conflicting characters, you'd have anti-heroes, you'd have conflicting storylines, subplots. Things got more sophisticated. And from there, from the synthesis of the game and the story, emerged what is called the game experience. which is not simply how hard the game is, but how rewarding a game is, how fun it is to play, how much personal reward you're getting as a player. And it can be seen in a way as a fusion between the narrative and the gameplay. From that point onwards, more mechanics emerged that bring this into the fore. For example, the QuickTime event. The QuickTime event is interesting because as simplistic and as flawed as it may be as a game mechanic, it still fuses together the story and the mechanic, because through one button press, the player can determine the storyline in a binary course. You either manage the QuickTime event, in which case the story goes in this direction, or you fail, in which case the story goes in this direction. Usually this direction meaning that you fail have to reload, but that's not always the case depending on the story. Even purely multiplayer games online, multiplayer games where you would think there's no story required, but they would still have a story element. For example, MMOs still have a storyline component. Even first-person shooters, Call of Duty, still come pre-packaged with a short single-player campaign. This shows that the single-player campaign, the single-player context, the story, is still an important part of the gaming experience today and will remain so, because it represents our motivation to keep playing, ultimately. Okay, so this brings me back to what I started off with. When it comes to tabletop role-playing games, the narrative or setting acquire much greater importance, because there is no ability challenge when it comes to a tabletop role-playing game per se. It becomes all about the story. It becomes all about what the games master is presenting to the players through which to interact. There isn't for example, let's take Mass Effect. Mass Effect has a very complex storyline, and is very focused on gameplay as well. In a role-playing game, a tabletop role-playing game, the combat element, the physical challenge element is absent. What is left is the storyline element. So in a role-playing game, the narrative has a much greater focus, has a much greater importance than digital games. And as such, we focused on it much more considerably. And this brings me to the approach we took when developing our world. The first step we did when we sat down to create the world of Sanctuary's Edge is what our theme would be, what would be our thematic approach. We asked ourselves, what kind of story do we want to tell through Sanctuary's Edge? And we considered different aspects, different elements, different angles, but what we came down to was the basic question of human nature. What is human nature? And this is where it gets slightly philosophical. Two prominent philosophers, so to speak, Locke and Hobbes, see human nature in different ways. For example, Locke sees man as a social animal. He's inherently good. However, Hobbes sees man as an animal, and that without society as a shield, he would revert back to an animalistic history, basically back to monkeys climbing around on trees. And in our story, we consider different situations. We consider different elements, different factors, which touch upon this theme. Basically, the story of Sanctuary's Edge is about human nature. What can cause human nature to shift one way or the other? Now, of course, it is not a clear cut, one way or the other. It presents instances where one interpretation of human nature seems to make more sense than the other, or interpretations where they both seem to make sense, or they're both flawed. So throughout the overarching narrative that underpins the game world, this is one of the leading themes. There are other themes which we discussed and which are present in our storyline. For example, the individual's ability to affect the progress of human development, overall history, the issue of predeterminism, even questions like nihilism or whether there is a point to existence, and even the idea of an individual enduring beyond time and space, and even beyond sanity. But throughout it all, it still comes back to this basic human question: what is human nature? The next point that we consider to be important when developing our setting is coherency, consistency, and the suspension of disbelief. What does this mean? My co-creators used to constantly pick on me about this, but throughout every stage of development, I always used to say, whenever someone used to raise an idea, it has to make sense. And they used to pick on me about this mercilessly, but I still cling to this belief that whatever you put into your game, into your product, into your brainchild, it has to make sense, because if you don't take your words seriously, nobody else will. Now obviously, we're talking about a futuristic fictional world, but even within that futuristic fictional bubble, there has to be the suspension of disbelief. There has to be a threshold at which you say, okay, within this context, this makes sense. Now this applies to whatever setting you're talking about, whether it applies to Lord of the Rings, to Middle Earth. Within that bubble of fiction, it has to make sense. You can't, for example, plot holes contradicting each other and contradicting the basic premise of what you're trying to achieve, because that is counterproductive. For example, plot holes will make audiences start to question and start to pick apart what you're trying to say, your storyline, your characters, your assumptions, the science of the world. Taking an example of a very famous film, Inception, it is interesting to note how the dream machine, for those of you who've watched Inception, the dream machine is never explained. It's not, the movie makes no effort to explain it. And at no point is it questioned. In fact, that is one of the factors that led subsequently to the film, that led to the movie interpretation, that the film itself was a dream sequence, that there was no reality. And that interestingly brings it back to the film's leading theme, the idea of questioning reality. So what I'm trying to say is that through not trying to explain one particular aspect of the film itself reinforced its thematic message. It did not try to hand out a pseudo-scientific explanation which nobody bought. It just stayed away from it. And as such, brought viewers back to the original premise of the film. For those of you who are fans of Star Wars, this brings to mind the obvious explanation of the Force, the idea of midichlorians in the blood, which many people had issues with. If they simply stepped back and left it as a vague, open-ended concept, they would have probably had more success with the franchise. But that's a different issue entirely. So we adhere to this approach as much as possible within the development of the world's narrative, insofar as the development of the game's rules. That's a different kettle of fish, because when we're developing the game's rules, we had various issues with how much sense they had to make. That is where you come to the issue of realism versus fun. Because in a story, you can adhere to realism as much as possible, but when you're manufacturing mechanics, there is a limit to how realistic you can get without over-mechanizing everything. William will talk about that in greater depth. So basically, when we came to developing the world itself, we worked from the ground up. We determined our starting point, we knew what we wanted to achieve, what we wanted to reach, what we wanted to achieve, and we effectively worked forwards in time, so to speak. We developed a narrative, a timeline for our storyline, which stretches a good 300-400 years within the game world, and we moved forward step by step, developing our narrative to storyline, based on the actions and on the developments which we determined would be significant and influential to the overall history of our world. And in this way, the present situation was determined. Now, to give you an idea of what the game's history is about, basically, the game setting is about, it's about a world called Sanctuary. As I said, it's a science fiction futuristic world, which takes place in an unknown future. The world itself is dry, arid, it is wrought with storms. Basically, humanity on this planet faces a daily struggle to survive. But through this, in the midst of this, civilization has nevertheless emerged and achieved a foothold. Now, against this basic canvas, we try to paint a more complex political situation, whereby there are a number of factions which are counterparts of modern day countries, but not quite counterparts, but you could think of them as that, which basically try to, they struggle for political, military, and technological dominance. So against this canvas, a player with a character can fit in through many different angles, and in many different ways. For example, if a particular group wants simply a world where they can shoot monsters and explore the frontier and basically act like pirates, they can. For those player groups who prefer a more political approach, who prefer more intricate, more detailed storylines, more, for example, covert operations, intrigue, mystery, subterfuge, that is possible as well. We try to keep it as varied as possible so that like, the game's master can pick up this book and create whatever type of adventure, whatever type of storyline he or she would want to create. So that's it for my introduction. Are there any questions so far? Okay.
Well, thank you very much. Okay, so first of all, question. Portal or Portal 2? Who played it? 1, 2, all right. Excellent, brilliant, all right. So we have about 7 Portal players. All right. Any other Valve games? Maybe, I don't know. Left 4 Dead, anybody? Okay. Or Half-Life or Half-Life 2? Okay, I'm going to focus a bit more about Half-Life 2, and this has a point. And the point is homework. I'm sorry, I'm going to give you a little bit of homework. If you do own Portal, I would like you to go and play it with the developer commentary on. They're brilliant, and they talk a lot about the design philosophy of Valve. They call it orange box testing. And it's quite a good idea. They do their game development in iterations, and for our game we did pretty much the same thing. This over here, if I had to keep versioning numbers, this would be Build Systems 6.0. So we had 6 major revisions over the years, all because, you know, game testing, focus testing. We do a lot of actually testing, you know, almost as much as a software development company would do. And for testing, we literally do something like this: get a room full of people, you know, set up a couple of groups, give them the game, and wait for the result. And that is a lot about orange box testing, and I think it's very important. We played the game ourselves. That was the first iteration where we changed a whole lot of things. But we couldn't continue to do the testing in that manner. As long as we're the only players, we're only going to build a game that's going to be fit for us. So eventually we had to go out there and start giving it to people and let them do their own thing. Now, the biggest thing about game mechanics that we found out while developing them was always a question between realism and well, enjoyment, really. So when I say realism, what do you understand when I say the word realism?
Something you can relate to, like Mr. mentioned, that it makes sense, something which we are accustomed to.
Okay, so it's something familiar.
Like if I expect to have a gun in the game, does it have bullets?
You
Like,
expect
can I
it to
shoot
go
people?
boom and then you expect a corpse.
I expect it to function the same way a gun would in real life.
Alright, so quick question. Super Mario Brothers, is there any realism in that game?
No.
None. None to be found. Actually, no, there is.
There is. The guy jumps.
Yes, exactly. The guy jumps. He runs off a ledge, fucker falls. We have gravity. And gravity works perfectly. It's not something instant. He has a terminal velocity and he starts falling slowly and picks up speed as he goes down. Even his run, he has an acceleration and has trouble to stop and slide. There is a certain basic amount of reality in everywhere. How much reality you put, obviously, then it's going to become, you know, a question of whether you're making a game or a real-life simulator. For example, The Sims. Is there a lot of realism there? It's essentially a Monday to Sunday simulator. But it's still fun, it's still enjoyable in its own way. It has its own market, but that is a case where there is a lot of realism which might, you know, might not exactly appeal to the traditional gamer. In fact, a lot of people who play The Sims, a lot of its audience, aren't really traditional gamers. We're not used to gaming in the way that The Sims gives us. We're used to having a goal to do, or at least having something to do beyond the everyday skullduggery of day in, day out. Something that happened to us in the first revision was too much realism. The problem with game rules is that you have to keep track of them. Whether you're doing this through software, or whether you're doing this through a face-to-face experience, you still have to keep track of them. So you decide, all right, I want gravity in my game. Are you going to take into account air resistance? Does Super Mario care if there's wind blowing in his face as he's falling down? Is the game going to take account of that? My guess is, for the SNES, no. If you're making an air simulator for the Airbus, alright, that might be a parameter where you wouldn't want that level of realism, but seriously, for something like Super Mario, no. And realism isn't only a problem of programming, it's not only a problem of mechanizing the game, it also becomes a problem of enjoying the game. You have to keep in mind that you have a duty towards your audience. You make people work, and the very first thing they do is they will drop your game and walk off. Don't make your audience do any work at all. The more difficult you make it for the player, the less they will be willing to play. So, what is the first goal of a game? Entertainment. Entertainment. And if your realism is getting in the way of entertainment, you don't have a game. You have a tool, maybe. I mean, do you know about Duke Nukem Forever? Anybody heard about Duke Nukem Forever? Endeavor. So, quick point about Duke Nukem Forever. The game developers decided to make this incredible game engine for it. It was so advanced that they took the basic programming and used it to simulate bridges. 12 years later, the company went bankrupt, and the product never got launched. Then somebody else picked up the IP, they took Duke Nukem, slapped it on a 5-minute job they did on over the weekend, sold the game, and made more money than the other guys did in 12 years. Too much mechanics. Does your game really need to simulate a bridge falling with pixel perfection and being correct to physics? Is it worth waiting 12 years for a game? And that is something that we did on our first run. And now imagine, you have an advantage. You're using probably software to simulate these game mechanics. Imagine if there's a storyteller that has to remember every last little detail, and every time somebody does something, oh, wait a minute. Alright, so step 1, step 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and now we can continue the game. That is a loading screen. A loading screen is incredibly boring. Somebody here ever played Mass Effect 1, the first one? Remember the elevators? Really slow elevators. That was a sort of a trick to avoid loading screen. While you're waiting in the elevator, the game is actually loading in the background. Smart little trick. We made fun of it, but hey, better than having a black screen with white text and Helvetica saying loading, please wait. At least, you kept the people engaged. And that is a problem that too many mechanics will make. And unfortunately, in this case, it is a balancing act. There's no black and white here. So something that we had to do a lot of times was deciding, all right, in real life, this happens. In real life, for example, a guy can't dodge bullets. But in the game, we have a defense stat. It essentially makes a person harder to hit the quicker he is. It doesn't work like that in real life. That is a very clear example where we had to sacrifice. We had to sacrifice logic and sense for the sake of mechanics. Because let's face it, if all of a sudden you make everybody who uses a gun automatically win every fight, first of all, we have removed half of our weaponry section because you'd have to be a complete idiot to take a knife into a gunfight. Mind you, it is true like this today. I mean, you don't see many terrorists walking around with flick knives today, now do you? You still go for the AK over the knife any day. But for a game, melee combat is important. First of all, it's bloody fun. Let's face it. I mean, Assassin's Creed, it's all melee. The guy has now a bow, a crossbow, a pistol, and you still go for the knife. Because it's awesome. This is a boring animation in comparison to this or this. Visually, melee is beautiful. So we wanted to have it in the game. And if you use logic, melee is ridiculous. Put two guys in a room, one with a gun, one with a knife. Gunner is going to win, unless he's, impaired. So in our game, we worked it in a way that little bit of logic had to suffer for the good of the game. On the other hand, don't overdo it. As I said, it is not black and white. You cannot say, we were going to, go 100% gameplay and 0% sense. I can't even think of a game that does that. I think that would be Pac-Man. Pac-Man has no gravity, no physics whatsoever. Doesn't have any sense of volume because he basically eats the whole level and never has to stop to go to the toilet. Yeah, I think Pac-Man would be a clear example of a game. Ah yes, sorry, forgot. Pac-Man cannot go through walls. There you have it. We still have physics. Okay, so yes, Pac-Man is tangible. So yes, at some point you have to have a little bit of realism. And in fact, Pac-Man is a good example because the amount of realism that they have in their game helps make the game. Take the physics, the part of the physics that you want to have in it, and use it to make it enjoyable. As long as the physics isn't getting in the way of enjoying the game, it's brilliant. Let's go back to Portal. So, what do we have in Portal? Basic walking and running and jumping, but there's no falling damage. Anybody has an idea why? Yeah. Yeah, she has springs on her legs. Okay, that is the story. In the story, the character was given a pair of magical boots that, even if you hit on your head, they protect you from falls. So that is plot-wise. Somebody went on a poor writer and told him, listen, I just invented a person that can fly at 60 miles an hour into a wall and doesn't get hurt. Now it's up to you to explain it to an audience. The guy says, I don't know, give her some magical boots. Okay, works, ship, sell. But why? Why did we have to invent these magical boots in Portal?
Because realism would tell you that you can't jump into a wall and not get hurt, so at least you need an excuse.
Well, you need an excuse, but imagine if they didn't have that. Imagine if every time you fail a puzzle, you die. And you have to start over.
It would be sort of stressful for the user.
Yeah. User stress, or rather tedium. So a lot of old games, if you notice, are bloody hard. This is something that you OD style gamers you like to refer to as games are too easy these days. Yes, in some cases that is the truth. However, old games are also tedious. Sometimes things don't need to be hard. This is a case where realism can get in the way of your gameplay. Imagine that every time somebody makes the slightest mistake, boom, dead, go back to a checkpoint 5 minutes ago into the gameplay. You know? So essentially, all of our iterations, as I said, this is the 6th one that we've done. All of our iterations were like that. We try out a new mechanic. Most of the time, it's either tedious or people are either forgetting about it. And this is something that's very interesting that happens in role-playing games as opposed to video games. I've seen it happen in video games sometimes, but it's rare. When the player doesn't care about a feature. at all. Did anyone here ever play a Jedi Knight game? A Jedi Knight. Alright, so you know Star Wars?
Yeah.
So yeah, in a Jedi Knight game, you're playing a bloody Jedi Knight. The very first thing the game does is give you a lightsaber and then you go. So from the first room in the game, you're given the best weapon in the entire universe, and you're told to just go wild. And that's exactly what players do. So I'm playing Jedi Knight, I'm at the last level, and by mistake I hit the mouse scroll button and this gun pops out. And I'm like, what the bloody hell is this? Where's my lightsaber? And I find out that I have 10 incredibly awesome weapons. So in the next room, I tried them all one by one, and one room later I'm back to the lightsaber. And I don't give a crap about the guns. In fact, I don't even know why they bothered to program them. And this is in a game where you have to run towards somebody and slash at them with a lightsaber. And I don't care about the rocket launcher. It's an example of a feature that doesn't need to be there at all. We had lots of features like that in our game as well. So we introduced this idea that every weapon has different, shooting modes, and you can shoot them single shot or double shot, or, But the player didn't care. They just stuck to what was simple, what was quick, and never really bothered to play with the modes. So why have them there? It's hard to keep track of them. Hard for the developer to make sure that every weapon has a number of different modes. For example, we have character classes. If you guys ever played any role-playing games, you know that there are these character classes. A warrior, a wizard, a rogue, okay, what you have. There are different professions within the game. So the very first idea was we need to make these professions as unique as possible. So we came up with this idea, let's make everyone uses what we call a fuel. So as you know, like in Super Mario, you have power-ups, which are basically drugs. They're shrooms, no, they're drugs. All of a sudden, your hero becomes indestructible, he's running faster, jumping higher. They're performance enhancers.
That's PCP.
Yes, that's some really good stuff. And the basic idea behind these drugs is that you want your characters to do incredible, amazing things, but you don't want them to do it all the time. So in Super Mario, simple. Give him a mushroom, he's awesome for a few times, and then, or the star. The star makes you invincible, and then it goes off after 12 minutes. You will find this in many games. You find a power-up, you're awesome for a couple of seconds, here you go. We have some sort of power-up as well for our characters. It's called the fuel system. Basically, you start off a scene with a certain amount of fuel, and then as you're doing awesome things, fuel goes down until you run out. Sort of like ammunition for coolness. Okay, you run out of cool eventually, and now I'm just normal like everybody else. But until that point, you were amazing. It also explains why, if you watch a movie, if Neo was able to shoot down a room full of bad guys in one scene, why in the next scene he's worrying about running away? Why is he worrying about four guys? I mean, in the same room where he was rescuing Morpheus, one room ago, he shot and killed 8 times the amount of bad guys that showed up to scare him off. Plus, they had the support of a helicopter. So why are we running away now? But it is the sense of the narrative. You want your heroes to be awesome for a very short time, and then our problem was this: 5 classes, 5 different fuel systems, 5 different rules. So when we came to balancing, you have to make a balancing act 5 different times. Anybody here who plays World of Warcraft? 1, 2, 3, or any other MMORPG? Okay, so yeah. Now imagine in an MMORPG you're balancing all those classes, and every class has a different system of how to handle mana or stamina or whatever. So most of the time the players simply stopped caring about it. And that's the worst thing that you can have in a game feature. It's like playing Portal, and the very first thing that the players do is throw away the Portal gun. Now imagine what a failure that would be. Like you've made a whole game around portals, and yet somehow, because of a bad design decision, everybody just walks to the exit without ever using the weapon that you designed the whole game around. So, another iteration, we made all of the fuel the same. Two reasons. First reason was simplicity. Since it was simple, now people are, caring about it. The second reason is community. If a player knows something, probably he's going to tell other players how to do it. Let's face it, we have egos, we like to brag. And the forums are the perfect place for bragging jobs. If you have some incredible build for, I don't know, World of Warcraft Paladin, you're going to tell everybody about it. It's not a big secret. If anything, you're just saying how awesome I am. By having the same mechanic for everybody, players started to cooperate. Our game is co-op. We have a strictly co-op game, and well, strictly multiplayer. So the first thing you want to have in a co-op game is your players, while they are together in the server, need to be able to communicate, fluently, and also be able to help each other. If you've played Left 4 Dead, that is co-op perfection. You can communicate with the other players without actually having to talk, and you can help them constantly. And in fact, you get rewarded for helping them. So another design consideration is everybody that is playing the game at the same time participating in it. Okay, so if you've played in a multiplayer game, if you have people who are either superfluous, useless, or replaceable, bad design. If you've ever played an MMORPG and you felt, I'm just here clicking a button and they could do without me, bad game design. So, out of curiosity, who here is currently working on a project? Software development. 1, 2, 3, 4, all right. Okay, so can I have some questions about maybe things that you've encountered during your projects? Any problems that you might have, after testing?
Well, rather than problems, what comes to mind is what you mentioned about features being superfluous because they're superseded by others. For example, you mentioned Valve, Half-Life. Multiplayer, you can create your own maps and people create their own scenarios. Forget the weapons, they just use the gravity gun and they create puzzle levels and everyone's and you ignore the complete multitude of other features.
Yeah.
So that's something which really hit me, and now that you're mentioning it, it's something which particularly sticks out. So that it's something which you need to look for, that you don't supersede parts of the game.
You need to look out for it, and you need to react to it in the correct way. Do you know about Gary's mod? So Gary's mod is a brilliant little. It's a toy. It's just a toy. So they took the game, they gave you the engine, you can move around things in it, you can build things. It doesn't have a goal, you cannot win points. It's literally just a toy. But that is a brilliant idea from Valve's perspective, because they have seen something happening in a game. Anyone here ever heard of emergence? You know what emergence is? Alright, could you explain emergence?
Emergence is, for example, the whole idea of rocket jumping.
Yes, exactly. The whole idea of rocket jumping. So, rocket jumping is when you have a rocket launcher, you jump in the air, shoot down, and use the blast to jump higher. The player is going to use your game in a way that you didn't intend and didn't anticipate. To exploit it, to jump higher, run faster. And if your game is sandbox, meaning, like Grand Theft Auto, you're going to have a lot of emergence. players are going to start doing crazy stuff that you never imagined. Gary's mod is a reaction to that emergence. They show that people like building things. Forget about, you know, killing the monster, just ignore him. Let's just play around with our graffiti gun. At that point, they didn't care about the story anymore. I want to toy around with the game. So emergence is something that you're going to encounter. You can do two things with emergence. Kill it. It might actually sometimes might be a good idea to kill emergence because it might be distracting you away from your product. You know? Or embrace it. By embracing emergence, you can either pull out a section of the game and make it its own thing, let it live there for whoever wants to join it. Or build a new game. Say, hey, out of our 6 attempted mechanics, this little thing in our game was embraced and, you know, and touched upon so, you know, a wild way that it's worth, you know, it's worth exploring. So that's basically emergence. If you've ever heard of League of Legends or Dawn of the Ancients, those are 2 games that came out of emergence. We had Warcraft 3, strategy game, somebody gave the toy to the people to invent their own maps. And out of that emergence came out 2 games which quite frankly nowadays are not multi-million-dollar businesses because they embraced it, or at least somebody else did. So, questions? Well, I think we can open up the floor for questions.
I have one question regarding the game. Sort of, at some point, it's going to be ready.
Yes.
What then?
Yes. First of all, just going to give you a few of these if you want to take them, some information. So, our current plan for the game. We are following a model for pen and paper role-playing games. Basically, the model is very simple. In our case, we're going to have a core set of books. We have 3 planned. Just so you know, this is, by the way, this is the game that we've designed. 180-page manuscript. This is beta edition. Full edition, this is going to be about 300 pages. The core books, they are going to be 3 core books. One is going to be this, which is our mechanics heavy book, and the little introduction to the story. Second book is going to be a sort of more on the story, more on the setting, more on the world, a lot more information on the history, a little bit of a smidgen of mechanics. The third book is going to be about in-game assets. Think of them as your vehicles, your weapons, they are, de facto, you can take this book on its own and play the game. The rest is expansions for the people who are really interested in the game and want to get to know more. Think of them like really big expansion packs. But beyond that, beyond the core 3, the model then, you know, we have a variety of products, and how we're going to be distributing them is different. For example, we're going to have other publications, other books, which are going to be much thinner than this. So, unlike the core 3, you won't be able to stun any burglar with it. But it is still going to be a book full of other information. Then we have adventures, which in most cases they're going to be free for download, which is, we find it to be quite good to have a lot of free content for our game, for people to get into it immediately. Then we might have even whole campaigns where they are sold as books. Once again, another 120-page, manuscript for a whole adventure, which would be our standalone stories. Apart from that, merch.
The World of Warcraft aspect of New Land.
Yeah.
Because
basically, that is at a certain point you reach a point where you can advance the story forward, so to speak. You can because the story stops the moment the book stops. But from that point onwards, you can issue an expansion where the story is projected forward by maybe a set amount of time. Maybe, okay, 10 years have passed. In the meantime, this happened. Now you have a whole new different aspect of the game you can explore.
Essentially, our gaming experience is a little bit different from other role-playing games. If you take a look at Skyrim. In Skyrim, they tell you, listen, you're in this fantasy world, you have the story that starts from here, and you have a problem you have to solve, and the problem will end here. Okay, you can continue playing up until you run out of every last bit of content that the game developers prepared for you. For us, it's a little bit different. We do have game content, but technically speaking, at the end of the book, you reach the end of where we left you off, and then you can just continue to go ahead forward with your own story, on your own. But eventually, with the expansions, we can also always move the history of the setting forward 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. Every time telling, listen, okay, so in those 5-year times, while you were having the awesome adventure that you and your friends were doing, by the way, the countries did this, and this. So if you want to incorporate this in your story, it's up to you.
And Michael, I also wanted to ask, sort of, at this point, sort of, you've been working on it for quite a while now. So, are you a company as of yet, sort of, or are you just a group of people working on a game?
We do have a legal binding. We do have legal binding between us to share expenses and.
Basically, whatever we create is our joint property.
That, and the second question would be sort of, I'm assuming you're looking to monetize it.
Yes, we are monetizing it, and we are effectively we are we're selling the books, which is our primary way of monetizing the game. Apart from that, we are planning to make a push for a crowdsourcing crowdsourcing effort to release the full set of core books.
Okay.
And then there's anything that might happen on the side that has to do with the game. We're usually a bit careful about over monetizing our efforts. We'd still like to leave a lot of things sort of like free downloads or community building things. And in fact, we just release a whole bunch of free stuff over our social media network. We find it good to basically not be dicks. Be nice to your be nice to your community, build your community, talk to them, listen to them. Apart from that, the money aspect is in of itself. We have a product at the end of the day that we're trying to sell, and if the product is good, yes.
Does it make sense to turn it into a video game?
Yes, indeed it does. And in fact, there are a lot of excellent video games that started as pen and paper role-playing game. If you have ever played Planescape Torment, Neverwinter Nights, Baldur's Gate, Fallout. Okay, so Fallout systems, like Warrior, yes.
Like actually, my question was more about if you're planning to actually turn it into a video game.
If we would have the means, definitely yes, we would be exploring that. As for planning it, definitely no. We don't have plans. I'm not going to say, all right, we're going to release next year. But
We're open to the idea of it.
we are open to the idea of it. If anything, we are developing the intellectual property. If we would find a company that would be willing to, take up the intellectual property and attempt to make a video game rendition, why not?
In fact, my question was, why books? Like for example, why the starting point was the books?
A variety of reasons. First of all, us three, we've done this. We have a lot of experience in this particular side of gaming. To us, since we do not have the technical expertise to make the kind of video games that we would want, we decided to make, all right, let's make the kind of role-playing game that we would want, because we can manage. We know that we can produce the art, we can produce the mechanics, we can produce the books, and we were quite happy actually with our printing service because they really came through for us. So we decided to go for something that we knew we were going to be excellent at. So we decided books and not video games, because while we do have a little bit of experience with software development, we don't feel as confident, to develop a fully fledged, video game for it. Like this, we might, be able to expand on it as much as we like. It gives us the creative liberty.
So along the same line, maybe I missed this part of the presentation, but so what are your backgrounds? Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, by the way, I am the game designer. Nestor is our main writer, and Yannick handles most of our tech issues and helps build the community system for us. My background is I've been in the hobby of game design for my God, 14 years, 15 years. Hobby is game design, and by hobby is game design I mean I have built systems, role-playing game systems that were used by people multiple times. Then there was storytelling. We've been a storyteller for the same amount of time. We've run stories and interactive role-playing experiences together. As far as background, I imagine you're pretty much the same.
My background primarily is in writing. I worked as a journalist with various newspapers, various magazines, creative writing, so that's my background is writing and creative storytelling primarily.
And as Will pointed out, I'm more the technical one, software development background, etc. Role-playing myself for coming on about 15, 14 years. So.
I do have a little background in software development. I have created small video games. Usually most click and create game engine.
And so have you released actually Sanctuary's Edge, or are you?
So yes.
Okay. Okay.
The beta edition is enough to play the
So
entire
this
game.
is the beta edition.
Yes.
Actually, okay.
All that means is we have extra stuff which we're going to add to the final book.
This is the precursor. William explained this, I think, but this is the precursor of where we want to reach. We want to reach a core set of 3 books. The main player's handbook, so to speak, which would be a much more expanded version of the beta, and then 2 different books. One would be more information regarding the setting, the world itself, the narrative that we're trying to tell, the world book. And the third would be a toys book, so to speak, a book that would have more monsters to kill, more weapons to use, more vehicles to drive, more toys basically,
Game
more
assets.
technology. So that's where we want to reach really, a core set of 3 books.
The idea behind having a beta edition first and then going for a full set of 3 is community building. We could have gone for Kickstarter immediately, but this is essentially evidence that we are capable of delivering a full game. Think of this as the demo,
It's a pretty generous demo, but still.
Yeah, very advanced.
Actually, no.
Polished,
Do you guys remember Duke Nukem? There was the shareware version where you used to play the whole first chapter before you actually can buy the whole game. This is our shareware. Alright? This is, imagine as if you were playing the first whole episode of Duke Nukem, and then with Kickstarter or Indiegogo or whatever, we will be able to release a full game.
Quick point worth making, that book doesn't represent as much as we've reached. That book represents what we had to have to hold back from actually putting in that book, because we have a lot more material we can put, but we wanted to hold back a lot so that we can give people an idea of what it's all about, and then push for the full material in the 3 core books which we hope to be able to publish in the near future.
In terms of development, I mean, we've developed enough for 2 of the core books, definitely, Yes?
I'm not so much into this sort of games, though I appreciate the literature that goes into it. But how would you market such a product? You have to monetize it at some point.
Yes. Well, we are primarily marketing through, mostly pushing a lot through Facebook and Twitter, the social media sites. It allows us to market directly at our target audience, and essentially our target audience are people who do role-playing, generally speaking, and well, fans of the genre. The genre, the sci-fi western genre, is lacking in terms of products for it. So whatever communities we do find, we find them very, like very insular, very dedicated to it because it's very niche.
Beyond that, even the hobby itself, pen and paper, tabletop role-playing games, is not particularly mainstream. So it is difficult to reach our target audience through mainstream channels. I mean, you won't have TV adverts about this kind of thing. Complete waste of money.
Locally,
what you could do, the best way to achieve, we found so far, is to achieve footholds in different communities. For example, we had a table at Comic-Con just now in December. And we made inroads with both our existing fan base, as in we've had people who recognized the game from before. Our first appearance in Comic-Con was in 2012, which was last year. That is when we first had our first table, we made our first contact with people, and this year people were recognizing our artwork, were recognizing our visuals. So we reaffirmed our link with the community we had already, which we made through playtesting, because, for example, if Yannick is one of our playtesters, for example, he'll go to his friends. One or two of them might want to become playtesters. 2 or 3 of their friends might want to become playtesters. That is primarily how our community grew so far.
And now, locally, we are going to push for a new thing that we're going to test out in January. We have one-off session workshops, which we are going to invite free of charge people who have come, talk to us and send us an email to come for a single session, play the game. It's going to be run by either me or Nestor or Yannick, okay, for 1 day at a local club, which very graciously have allowed us to use their rooms. And essentially, that is a way how to cultivate an audience. Now, we can do this locally, but we cannot do this globally yet. But this is done actually by the big companies in the business. So the biggest, the biggest company, the biggest shark in this water would be Wizards of the Coast. Those are the guys that push multi-million-dollar projects, and they still do these workshops. Literally just set up for 1 weekend an area and a city convention center, invite people over, play our game. You have a whole day role-playing with a professional storyteller, and then you and your friends can just pick up the book and then go and play it on your own. So that is one of our strategies, cultivating an audience. We are creating groups of people who not only know the game, but have experienced it and will want to try more of it. But this is local, because this is within our reach. Globally, we're just trying to make contacts with as many different people in the industry, like artists, over Twitter, other independent, game designers. You use Twitter, there's a lot of people. You start linking to them, and they start linking to each other. And it explodes really quickly, faster than Facebook. Facebook, you're going to have to pay a little bit of money to get your community going on, but at least Facebook has a very smart way of how you can market. You can market directly to people that, for example, if you're doing platform games, you can market to people that directly like platform games. So when you do your Facebook ads, you can add the interest on who you want to watch your ad. Obviously, we target pen and paper role-playing gamers. Other questions?
Question regarding globally, obviously, since have you had any ideas sort of where to target globally?
Yes, where and locality is very important. First of all, we talked with a friend of ours, marketing. He's a marketing guy. Helped us free of charge, thankfully, and essentially he gave us a couple of ideas that aren't very intuitive. For example, our game is a very indoors game. Where he told us you should try and market climates where people are less willing to go and do something outside.
Like UK primarily,
Like
Nordic countries.
UK, Nordic country. Then there's another problem.
Language.
Language barrier. See, by profession I'm an English teacher, so I have to face foreigners who can barely pick up a book and read it on the daily. So we are obviously marketing to primarily, predominantly English-speaking countries. And then there is a little bit of guesswork, but sometimes it helps. For instance, we're doing a Western. So when you think of Westerns, you can go either two ways: America or Italy. The Italians fucking love Westerns, so market in Italy, and it'll get picked up. In fact, a lot of our Facebook people that like Italian. You target the right audiences, and you will find your little markets. Globally, unfortunately for us, that is currently our only way how to market. There is also the exploration of cons.
Have you considered going?
Yeah.
That is on our to-do list to go to, for example, to the
London.
London Con. Currently, the UK represents our best stepping stone market we have available right now. Possibly, eventually, we'll go to the US, but baby steps.
Any other questions?
I think. Any questions?
So I was going to ask about, so I guess the three of you still have full-time jobs.
Yes.
Which is not related at all.
No.
So my question is sort of how do you handle this stuff? Sort of like funds and things like that, expenses.
Well,
I'm guessing
funds-
this is all personal expenses, right?
Well, funds we share them, try to share them as equally as possible. As regards to time, well, that's the reason why we've been at this for 3 years. I mean, if we could focus on this for a full-time basis, that book would have been done in a maximum of 6 months, 8 months.
But the book, are you selling the book right now?
Yes.
So that's you have a sort of a flow of income.
Instead of income, it's more something to mitigate the costs.
It's a mitigation of the cost, basically.
We're still well out of pocket so far. Going by the expenses we've had for participation in Comic-Con, preparing artwork, commissioning artwork from foreign artists.
But that's the biggest expense. I mean,
Printing.
most of our basic artwork comes from Will himself. A lot of just the digital art, that's all we have to pay for. Some legal costs.
Don't forget your own time you're investing in this.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
That's also what's
That's the biggest expense, I think, the time we're investing.
And do you have a series of deadlines that you aim to reach?
Yes. Recently we got very organized on the whole deadline. On the whole deadline front, thanks to a little bit of software with Yannick from.
We bought the concept.
In fact, that might have been our biggest crutch before. Organizing yourself. Use something. Microsoft project. We use .mac.com. Use something that nags you, that reminds you of, listen, this week you had to do this, this, and this.
It's easy to lose track of time. It's very easy to lose track of time, and before you know it, 6 months have passed, and
Yes.
that two-page write that you have to prepare.
There were
still
some
bullet points.
There were some instances where we either forgot that we had to do something and we went for a release without it, or we forgot that we had to work on our project and 6 months had passed. In fact, we printed this book, we took it to print in record time. Because while the material is there, just so you know, we have material for those 300-page books, we have material for 2.5 of them. But
It's currently unrefined, but it's
putting it together,
That's the...
yeah.
That took more effort than we anticipated.
Just to give you an idea,
Monsters amount of it.
during my talk, I mentioned the timeline. We developed a timeline for the history of the setting that stretches across 200 years. That timeline is in bullet points, currently covering about 25 to 28 pages in bullet points.
Verdun La Fontaine.
Imagine taking that and converting it into a narrative.
And we
That will
discussed,
take work, but the material is there.
we discussed converting it into a narrative 2 years ago, and still we're
Yeah.
pending.
Far off.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing about this. If you do not get organized, all you have at the end of the day is just ideas floating in the air. And when we came to put all of those ideas together in a book, then all of a sudden it became, it became apparent how big this thing has gotten. You know, it was just a bunch of documents flying here and there. They actually seemed smaller when they were scattered in the room. The moment we put them together, it was a shock. We spent 2 weeks, I think 500 emails. Just, you know, make a change there, move that little image to the left, and we're happy with the final product. If we had organized ourselves more, it would have been even better. You know? So, yeah.
Great. Thank you. Also, they deserve guys, follow them, Facebook, Twitter.
We need 5 more likes on Facebook to reach 300.
Good. Tonight. Great.
Does everybody have one of these?
There are some back there, there were some remaining. One point I'd like to make regarding what you said, I was speaking to Nestor earlier. The medium is different from digital games. It's the game mechanics. In fact, I was just Hanik Shokti, where I was discussing that, yeah, this is on a pen and paper. It's on a book, but it's still a game. So it's same kind of dynamics. It's what you said about not being that mainstream. Maybe people might not be aware of the same level of fun, basically, same level of experience, possibly even more immersive. So do give it, if you're not that familiar with pen and paper or such style of games, do give them a shot. They're selling it. Buy their game.
By the way, the January workshops are free of charge. They are open to everybody. So if you do follow us on Facebook and want to give them a try, there's plenty of spaces for everyone. In fact, even if you want to organize a group of 5 people from this very same room and keep you together, just say so on the email and we can make a workshop for you for free.
Take names after when you.
Just send us an email. We're always
very active on social media, so they're always
very active.
Great. One small announcement that I stop talking. So, 2. Institute of Digital Games are organizing the Global Game Jam for late January. So if that's something which you're interested in, please take part. They'll be announcing some more information soon, I believe.
You
might be more familiar with
I'm
them.
involved in the organization,
Alright,
so we'll let you guys know.
So go to him. One small, semi-medium major announcement. Our game is finally out. It's been in review for quite a few weeks now. We finally, after a few phone calls, it's been reviewed, it's been accepted. It's online on the App Store to download, so Trail of the Treasure Snatcher. I don't have time to plug in my iPad to give you a nice screenshot of it right now because I didn't plan ahead. But anyway, we'll be holding a kind of a focus group in January if you're interested in participating. We're still learning the ropes, we're getting used to it, so rather than delay launch until a few months later, we launched it. Nice playable version, nice clean entertainment, nothing too fancy. It's not Angry Birds, but still, it's a first attempt. We've got an update being planned to polish a few major features in that game. If you'd like to be involved in the focus group, beta, gold version, testing, call it whatever you want, major launch, international launch, just let us know, contact us through our website, Facebook, speak to me now. Just let us know, we'll keep you updated. Thank you for coming, thank you for presenting this. If I don't see you by the end of the year, have a happy Christmas, great New Year, enjoy your holidays, see you next year. Thank you.